Hello everyone, this is Mike Corrali, and this is my peroration for our United States government class. A peroration is simply a fancy formal academic way of our concluding remark. This recording is simply for your pleasure and for your edification, and as an opportunity for me to thank you all as students individually and as a class collectively in helping me maintain my interest in the study of political science, specifically in this case with American government. We just want to wrap up by going over what we've learned. We've covered a lot of ground, my friends, in the last 14 weeks, and I thank you and I honor you, and I am in great awe of your capacity to learn, to write, and to engage on such a consistently deep level in this class. Thank you. You know, looking back, you have to ask yourself first, why do we bother to study these ideas and institutions in American government? Well, I would suggest to understand the influence government has on our lives, to understand why the government produces the policies that it does, to understand and interpret current events in a rapidly changing world, to understand how the United States attempts to resolve conflicts and seeks to establish order and security, to develop the ability to solve problems and make good decisions when current events and economic and social issues affect us directly, to apply our understanding when voting, petitioning, and speaking publicly, to deal with the government effectively in all of our future activities and your future professions, to prepare us for a career that requires a strong knowledge of government, to use our understanding of government to participate and to bring about change in our community and in our country, and finally to contribute to the success of our democracy that depends on our understanding and collective participation. We began way back when in examining the Declaration of Independence, and you may remember our seminar question. What were the influences of history, culture, economics, and philosophy on the drafters of the Declaration of Independence? How can we see those influences reflected in that essay and subsequently in contemporary American political society? In Chapter 2, looking at the Constitution, we asked ourselves, how and why was the Constitution created? We examined what the main features of the government were under the new Constitution. What conflicts emerged first during the writing of the Constitution and then later during the ratification debate. Although Chapter 3 was subsumed under Chapter 2's essay on the Constitution, we remember we studied the case for federalism that is advanced by Federalist theory, which argues that federalism provides a robust constitutional system that anchors pluralist democracy and that it enhances democratic participation through providing dual citizenship in a compound republic. In Chapter 4, we examined civil liberties that helped us appreciate the balance of power that is codified in the Constitution. Specifically, we asked how the existence and exercise of civil liberties showed evidence of structural and procedural balance of power and of pluralism. In Chapter 5, you may remember, we listed and described 3 of the major civil rights movements in American history. We examined what some of the main goals and tactics were in each movement, what the movements had in common, how were they different, what were their successes, what were their failures, and finally, how do civil rights and that conversation around civil rights contribute to our pluralistic democracy. In Chapter 6, we examined political socialization and looked at how the socialization of the U.S. electorate adds to and detracts from the Madisonian model, the balance of power. In Chapter 7, we examined pluralist theory that holds that groups, instead of the electorate, actually control the democratic process in this country. In our Chapter 7 essay, we examined pluralist theory and presented arguments, pro and con, as to whether it helped or hindered the democratic process in our constitutional republic. In Chapters 8 and 9, we looked at campaigns and elections and political parties. We asked, how do the goals and tactics of political parties vis-a-vis elections and campaigns advantage or disadvantage democratic theory and pluralism? We remember that we looked at comparative ideologies before we dove into the institutions. We looked at comparing and contrasting the main elements of classic liberalism, of new liberalism, of Marxist socialism, and of fascism. In Chapter 10, Congress, we examined the institutional and structural characteristics of our legislature and how those support or impede the pluralist ideal. In Chapter 11, we looked at the presidency and we asked ourselves, how do the disparate roles of the presidency add to or detract from the ideal of the Madisonian model? In Chapter 12, we asked if the iron triangle helps or hinders the pluralist ideal, that iron triangle naturally being the unbreakable relationship between congressional committees, interest groups, and bureaucracies. In Chapter 13, we studied the judiciary, and we asked if the prerogative of judicial review held by the Supreme Court complements or detracts from the ideal of representative democracy or of pluralism. We branched out a little further, looking internationally, first by studying globalization, where we opened our newspaper and we selected a news item that gave evidence of the advance or retreat of globalization as we understand it, and by virtue of the elements described in our recorded lecture. We looked at international political economy, and we used President Trump's 2019 trade war with China as a relative case study describing international political economy and its predominant perspective, structure, and levels of analysis. We wrapped up with our look at California state and local governments, asking ourselves what elements of California state and local seem similar to those at the federal or national level, and what elements seem different. We asked ourselves what would account for those differences. My friends, you know that I'm a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt. He was a complex, conflicted guy. He was a man of his times. But I love this last quote that I'm going to leave you with from our studies, and wish you all the best in your future career and in your future studies. Teddy Roosevelt said, in facing the future and in striving, each according to the measure of their capacity, to work out the salvation of our land, we should be neither timid pessimists nor foolish optimists. We should recognize the dangers that exist and threaten us. We should neither overestimate them nor shrink from them, but steadily, fronting them, should set to work to overcome and beat them down. Grave perils are yet to be encountered in the stormy course of the Republic. Perils from political corruption, perils from individual laziness, indolence, and timidity, perils springing from the greed of the unscrupulous rich and from the anarchic violence of the thriftless and turbulent poor. There is every reason why you should recognize them, but there is no reason why we should fear them or doubt our capacity to overcome them, if only each will, according to the measure of their ability, do their duty, and endeavor so to live as to deserve the high praise of being called a good American citizen. All right. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, class. Namaste.